Yes. Morning. We appreciate you coming on Tech Talk today. We'll get started with this, but first a little bit of business for the Tech Club. I've had people sometimes come up to me and say, thank you so much for what you do for the Tech Club. We need to recognize that everybody on the board is a very significant part of what we do because each of us has a piece in that. So our vice president is Larry Schreier, and he runs the tech team. He is our tech go-to person. And then Liz Perry is our treasurer. She keeps track of our finances and our membership records. Is something you'd like to say?
Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead and finish. I have to go grab.
And Maureen Rodriguez is our secretary. So she helps with our meeting minutes and any kind of secretarial stuff that we need. And her husband, Martin Rodriguez, is our director. He kind of gives us a steady course. But another significant person
Just walked out the door.
just walked out the door is Tim Walter, past president of the club, and he has been the one who's kept everything going for all this time. So I appreciate everyone's help. So our first item is the lab report, the Tech Lab.
We only have a few things, but you probably noticed the TV now sitting in the lab up above the cabinet there. That has a Google Chrome device on it, so you can cast any of the computers there up to that big TV. The main reason for it is so we can hold some classes in there, but if anybody has a desire to use it, we can show you how to use it. There's also a monitor sitting on the work area there with an HDMI cable on it. If your laptop or other device has an HDMI port on it, you can use the bigger screen that's available. And so that's really all the new stuff going on in there. But if anybody has a tech issue with the computers in there or anything like that, just email the Tech Club. I get that. There's several of us that get that, and we'll respond as soon as we can if we get an email. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Girl. Easier for you.
I don't really have anything to say about it.
My birthday is not until they got to say that our mission is approaching. Thank you so much. You want to hear a treasury report? We're getting new members all the time, and that's wonderful. Yes.
No, not at all. In fact, please have coffee. Caffeinated coffee, it's a good thing.
And like I said, I think I'm gonna get a table for that. Last word. The other thing that is happening in the lab, we are getting geared up to offer special classes on different topics that the ones that we know about, because sometimes people come and ask how to do this and that. Not all of us are proficient in a particular thing. So those of us who want to on the Tech Club are going to teach different topics in the Tech Lab using that one big monitor. And the thing is, it's not just us. If you really know how to do something, we want you to share that. So please contact us if you have just something you really know, you do it well, and ensure that. And I know people have, made suggestions of what we can offer, and some of those things we can do, and something really not. We may end up going to YouTube, but as a group, sit together and figure out how to do something that's better on YouTube, and help each other out, yes.
Yes, how do you find out if you're going to have class?
Oh, good point. We announce the classes and all the tech, information in our monthly newsletter. If you're a member, you should be getting that. If you're not, let us know. Also in the communicator, comes out every week. And the Suncatcher comes out every month. So we will have all of those notified. You'll be notified about all of them.
It'll also be on the website.
And on the website, and the other thing Larry does is he maintains the website, so you can always check that out and see what's happening. And in that regard, every tech talk that we have is recorded and put on YouTube. So if you missed something, or you know somebody who wished they were on a particular tech talk, and they missed it, go on YouTube, look up Sunflower Technology Club, and you'll find it there. And,
There's also links on the website for that.
and there's a link on the website, and Larry just keeps on board, up to date. Yes,
I just got a new computer, it's got Windows 11. So that would be good.
that might be another topic in Windows 11, yes, thank you, because all of the computers in the tech lab, except the one that's in Apple, have Windows 11. How many of you have been able to use Windows 11? Tech lab? I hope, okay, all right, so some of you know that, and you may be able to show others some simple that can be done. So, anybody want to say anything? Oh, I do want to also add that in May, at our member tech meeting, we're going to have elections, because in the odd number of years, we elect the secretary and vice president. In the even number of years, we elect the president and the treasurer. So if any of you would like to be a candidate in that election, let us know. So, but I do give great thanks for doing that already. And, but if somebody wants to step up, and another position is to be another director. Usually there are 2 directors. And that's just a volunteer thing, there's no election. You just say, yeah, I want to be involved in that. And you just help support. Tech Lab. So, our speaker today, Lori Schrock, and she's going to tell you all about, and then, and how she presents. Thank you. So I would just say, as a disclaimer, we always invite volunteers to come and talk at our member meeting, and there's no way an endorsement. We just appreciate the knowledge that they bring.
Thank you. Make my slide show up.
Yeah.
All right, so I just want, I'll introduce myself. I'm Lori Schropp, and I'm currently an application software administrator.
Not
Yes.
working. Okay, of course. not. I can do it. Just
Go ahead. Yeah, there we go. All right, so I wanted to introduce myself and just kind of tell you a little bit about who I am and where I come from, so you know who you're talking to. I am not a computer scientist. I'm not an IT professional. But I got my degree at the University of Washington. And I have a Bachelor of Science. Go ahead, Steve, right? I got a Bachelor of Science in, oops, go back. There we go. In laboratory medicine. So I was a medical technologist is what my profession was. I worked for a few years when I graduated in the Peace Corps in Thailand, in Chilbury Hospital. And after 6 years of being in the clinical world and working in the laboratory, I got bored. And I made the leap from the clinical to the business and technical side of things. So basically, I jumped out of the laboratory and into the business world where I could start working with computers and computer software. And so over the past 30 years, I basically built my career as at different medical software companies. I've implemented software at large hospitals and cancer centers. I've written technical documentation. I've done a lot of teaching on how to use software applications. And the last 20 years, I was the VP at a small startup for a clinical software company of the support department. So we saw a lot of interesting things, and that's probably where I got a lot of my education outside of the actual application software. And I retired a couple of years ago from all of that and kind of jumped over into the lending world. And that's where I currently reside at Priority Lending. So that's a little bit about me. You want to advance it one? Okay. So the first thing I want to do is talk about some terminology before I get into talking about the cloud. I asked him, what are the kinds of questions you guys have? What are you looking for information wise? Again, I don't have a terribly technical IT perspective on things. I'm mostly software, but I think it's important that we start with some terminology so that we're on the same page. So application software basically is the computer programs that are designed to carry out specific tasks. And it's the kind of software that's not related to the operation of the computer itself. So for example, I put an example of TurboTax up here. Everybody knows TurboTax, right? If you've used it or you at least heard about it, it's designed to help end users complete their income tax forms. And that's really the world I've been in for the last 30 years, not TurboTax, but that. Then there's system software, and system software is basically software that provides a platform for other software. So it relates to the operation of the computer itself. So as you know, Windows 10 operating system, Windows 11, your browsers, those types of things are are software that help the computer run and help you put software on top of that, layer on top of that, so that the software that you put on top of it, like TurboTax, you can actually use. And so that's what those things mean. Then there's database. That's basically an organized collection of information. So as you know, you probably heard the term garbage in, garbage out. If you haven't, computers are only as smart as the people who are on the other end using them, right? So you can't say that the computer told me this or the computer told me that. Sometimes that's true, but databases pull the information. So you go out on your computer, let's say you go to a website and start typing information in. Where is that information going? It's going to a database somewhere. And a data center is basically a building or a dedicated space within a building that's used to house the computer systems and the associated components. So like your data center looks like that cart right there. Here in your network. Okay, so that cart's located in this room, so this room's your data center, basically. Data centers have special needs. A lot of data centers are huge. They need air conditioning because all of that equipment gets hot and you don't want your equipment to get too hot. Fire suppression, they need power supply to run all of the servers and everything that's churning away. They need data communication connections to the internet, to each other, networking, security devices, all kinds of stuff. I know I think they're building new data centers up in Chandler. There's a lot of people in the neighborhoods up there who are complaining because they're so noisy. Well, they're noisy because you're out here in the desert and you got to keep those data centers cool, right? So they've got like tons and tons of air conditioning systems and sitting all around them and on top of the roofs and everything to keep those data centers cool, and it turns up a lot of noise. So, data centers are kind of cool. Okay, then there's IT infrastructure. This is something that, you're very familiar with. Defined broadly as a set of information technology components that are the foundation of an IT service. So physical components like servers, modems, then various software like network components, like VPN software, operating systems, firewalls. Those are all the things that your IT folks take care of. And that's what the, Tim and these folks here are doing. They're putting all this stuff together, they're taking care of it. They're your IT people, that's your IT infrastructure. Then there's the computer. And that's basically, as you know, a machine that is programmed to carry out a sequence of arithmetic, logical operations automatically. Okay, I'll admit, that's the Wikipedia definition of that. There's personal computers that are desktop wired. So, the personal computers came about like in the 1990s, 1980s, 1990s. And you've got more recently laptops, you've got now your tablets, your phone, your smartphones, those are little computers. So there's all kinds of computers out there. And then you've got VPN, and I'm mentioning this one, virtual private network. And it's basically a mechanism, because you might hear this throughout either my discussion or other discussions. It's a mechanism for creating a secure connection between a computing device and a computer network, or between two different networks using an insecure communication medium such as the internet. And I say that the internet is insecure, kind of is, kind of isn't. I mean, it's got its share of securities in it, but a VPN is actually more of it's more secure and it's more encrypted. And what I mean by encrypted is code the information on one side, send it over to the other side, and then the other side gets the key to the code so they can uncode it and read it or do what they need to with it. That is a very simple explanation, but at the end of the day, that's what a VPN or a virtual private network does. 90% of or 95% of households out there probably don't have VPNs. They really don't need them. They're probably not doing secret work. But if you're in a big company, or you're working for Boeing, or you're working for Intel or something, and you're logging in from home across the unsecure internet, you're going to log into their virtual private network and make sure that all the information that's passing back and forth is more secure. We did a lot of that with our hospital systems. And then there's APIs. You've probably heard of APIs. Those are application programming interfaces, and it's basically a way for two or more programs to communicate with each other. And so there's a lot of API stuff that goes on out there in the cloud world, because that's the whole purpose of all these things, is to talk to each other. You've got everybody's doing their specialty, just like doctors. You used to have your one doctor back in the 1800s in your town, if you were lucky to have them, and they kind of had to do everything. But now you've got specialists. So, you go to your primary care doctor, and then they're sending you off to the heart doctor, or off to the kidney doctor, or off to the blood doctor, or whatever. So you've got all kinds of specialists that do their own thing. They all have to communicate with each other. It's kind of the same way software programs are. They do different things. A lot of them have to communicate with each other. So that's what the APIs do. So to answer the question up front, what is cloud computing? The Wikipedia definition says cloud computing is the on-demand availability of computer system resources, especially data storage, which you probably have all heard of cloud storage, and computing power, the ability to use the software and software doing its thing in computing without direct active management by the user. So what does that really mean? Okay, so in a nutshell, it allows the users to access software and store information via the public internet without having to store or manage anything on their own PC. So in a nutshell, you don't have to worry about taking care of the software itself. When you log out to a system or log out to a company, let's say I'm going to go shopping on Coldwater Creek, I don't have to know how to use their system per se. How do I use the software that allows them to go search for dresses in size 10 or whatever. All I have to do is I look at the user interface on my phone or on my PC, I'm using that information, and they're taking care of all that other stuff that's happening behind the scenes. When I order something, I pay for it, I have an invoice or whatever, they're taking care of that, storing that, and they have all that information on their side. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it. So that there's a lot of advantages to it, because you're just basically putting yourself across the internet, you're working on something, and then you're going home. Come back, close your computer down, and now you don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay, so let's look at cloud computing versus local computing. So what's the comparison? So what does it mean really to be out on the cloud versus to be on your PC? And I see a lot of you guys have Apple. I'm sorry, but I'm not an Apple user, so I can't speak directly to that, but you know, the concepts here are all the same. Let's look at tax software. 5 years ago, you could go to Costco and purchase TurboTax, get a CD, there's a little button on the side of your PC and it opened up, you put the CD in, you load the software. So now it's on your PC. You're in charge of it, okay? Is that cloud or local? Local, thank you. Now you go to the bank, say your bank or your financial institution has access to you have access to their free copy. They have a copy of TurboTax software, or you go out and use something called taxact.com. I don't know if anybody's ever used that, but I've used that for my taxes a long time ago. Would that be considered cloud or local? It'd be cloud, yeah, because your bank is taking care of all of that. The information you input, keep this in mind, being stored on the bank's servers, and you can still download the information, you can save it to a stick, you can, you know, you want to save a copy of it, of your taxes when you're done, but all that information that you're entering in and putting in, that's being stored on their servers. Now today you go to Costco, purchase TurboTax. There's no CD anymore, right? But they provide you with a URL or a website, log on out on their URL, you load the software, and you access the code to open it. Is that cloud or local? Combination. In reality, the first part of it is sort of cloud. It is cloud. You're going out, they store the software out there, they store all the little ID numbers or IDs that they give you so that you can open it up once you load it. But once you grab it and pull it into your PC, now you've loaded it, just as if you had hit that button and put that physical CD in it and loaded it. Okay, so once you start using the actual application, now you're local again. It loads because it loads up the database, the software and everything on your PC, and everything that you're doing is being held on your PC. Okay, so if you think about that, what is one thing that's a little, that you think is a good thing about cloud computing? If you're thinking about that in terms of tax, or of anything. That's correct. That's a good point too. As long as you have the internet, it's there and available. That's beautiful. And think about it, you know, the younger generation, probably the tail end of the Gen Xers, maybe, they were certainly thinking about it because they're the ones who developed it all, right? And then you've got your millennials and now your Gen Zs, and they're all looking for, how can I work without really being tethered to an office and work? You know, they all want that. And we have made that so available to them, you know, through all of this technology and cloud computing. And you're absolutely right. The whole beauty of having someone else host everything is, as long as you have a device and an internet connection, get to it, do what you need, get stored, you can grab the information off if you need to pull it off and report on it or do whatever with it. It's all there, but it's really somewhere else, right? So where is that somewhere else? Let's look at, pointing that in the wrong direction. Let's look at what the cloud looks like, okay? Setting the scene. This is basically, this is us. We're out here on our phones, our laptops, our desktops, our tablets. And all this stuff in between really is what the cloud is. Somebody else is taking care of the application software. Somebody else is taking care of the platform, the databases, the storage, and even the identity. You know, because when you log into just about any site, what do they always ask you to do? You need to identify yourself, right? You need to put in a username and a password so that if you want to come back, they know who you are. And then they also take care of all the infrastructure, which is what our IT people are so good at. Okay, and then so many of us are so bad at it, right? I'm bad at it. So anyway, so that's basically it's a beautiful thing. It's a thing of beauty. Let's look at some different cloud deployment models. We have private clouds. So if you've ever heard of a private cloud is a service that's completely controlled by a single organization and not shared with others. Okay, so there's tons of clouds out there, as you can probably imagine. A lot of companies, corporations, hospitals, all those places, they kind of create their own clouds. And these clouds allow their employees to work remotely. They have a PC, an internet connection, they can get to it, but they don't want outsiders to come into it. The Defense Department, I kind of doubt that they want to make their cloud public. Then you've got public clouds. Those are services that are considered public. A subscription service is usually offered to any or all customers who want similar types of service. So if me and 5,000 of my lady friends want to go to Coldwater Creek and shop, you know, they've got their own little cloud, shopping cloud that they take care of, but they allow us all the URL or the website address to run out there and log in and do our shopping. And we don't have to worry about all that stuff behind the scenes. We just get to go enjoy the front end of it. And then there's hybrids, which are a combination of private and public clouds. Okay, is there any questions so far? Yes. Okay, so you're buying a service from Apple, and their service is we're gonna create a database over here for you to stuff all your stuff, your pictures and your files and things into. We're gonna take care of that for you. We're gonna keep that viable. We're going to back it up. So, and what we mean by backup is backing up the information so that if something happens to the server that it's on, it's still available somewhere else. You know, and they can do that through a lot of different mechanisms. So that's what you're paying for.
So if I have so if I take a picture, those my iPad, you're only being charged if you see your free storage. We're paying for 10. That way, even if I just went to Tesla and sign on to my Apple ID, I can do everything there. I don't have to do it here. It's a normal place of meeting for big, so for how many photos you have and files and what you're backing up. Some people like to back up everything. Other people don't care for backing up their contact information. I like having messages in the home device. So if you want to be able to get your messages from your iPhone, then you have to be backing up. It's all your settings. You just have to check these things, but I'll show you everything.
That's a great explanation though. And that's the whole beauty of the cloud is it can be accessed through any of the devices. Yeah, how much? Yeah. I have a hard time with that concept. You're probably really a lot better at it than I am about, you know, how many meg or gig or whatever of space you need. Just know it's a lot.
Yeah.
And pictures take up a lot too. Certain files take up a lot more space than others, and pictures take up an enormous amount of space, and so do videos. Videos take up even more. So, you know, if you do a lot of that, like if you're a photographer, an avid photographer, and you do a lot of filming in that, you probably would need more, but if you're not, then you just don't need a whole lot.
Microsoft, which is gonna be a pain in the neck right now, because they're taking over my life. And so, and they say you're running out of space, I think it's $2.99 a month. And what I wanted their thing for, which was fine, is automatically backing up my files. You don't have to do anything, it's automatic. If I save a file on my computer, the first thing that it does is it saves it to their cloud first, even before it puts it on my computer. And so then it started to say there's, lack of space, so I started to delete things. And they said, oh, now February 1st, we're gonna put all of your back emails on there. But I didn't have a choice. So then I started to delete emails. But anyway, so it's, they're hooking me in where I can't get out, and they're gonna charge me so much a month. And my certain concern is, once they use more space, then they'll say, no, you need more space, and they're gonna charge.
Yeah, that's the gotcha.
The problem is getting somewhere that you say, I don't want to back up emails, I only want to back up this, and that. It's usually a text.
No, I can't blame that. What I did just the other day is I said, disconnect my computer from the cloud, because I backed up all my stuff. What it did is I left all the directories on my computer, and then it shows my files, but now that I can't access any of them, it says you gotta be hooked to the cloud to see your files. So now when I'm backing them up off my flash drive, because I got their old files on there, and I can't delete their files. So I guess if I want to go back with them, all of a sudden move my files to here again. I kind of like I said, I feel like they're taking over.
Come to one of the help sessions on Sunday and we'll help you with your settings and get that straightened out.
Yeah,
We can
you
do
gotta, it takes a long time sometimes, to get that on that.
We have a little problem. The slides aren't progressing. They're progressing here, but they're not progressing.
Okay,
So I'm gonna have to stop it and restart it.
technology issues.
Yeah.
This is all good conversation, and you bring up a really good point that I was gonna bring up, and I'll just bring it up now and talk about it. Is, all of this technology has offered things as services, and I don't even know if I included in the slide deck because it's pretty boring, but there's a lot of different, there's like internet or networking as a service, there's software as a service, there's all these things as services, and that the business is booming out there, and that's what they're doing, is they're 99-centing or dollaring everybody to death with all of this stuff. And it's really good to know and to try to understand, do I really need that? Do I need to back that up? Like, for example, I use Comcast, and they back up my emails. So do I need to back my emails up and pay for it off of Google or one of these other companies that offers that service? Probably not, because they have it over. But if you don't know that, and you're not sure what they back up, and I also know that Comcast only backs up like a month. Well, they don't back up everything. So if you want to go way back, you might want to save that. And again, if it's on your PC, you're probably okay until the PC goes down. And if your PC never goes down, and you don't have, and it doesn't crash, and you never have to recover that, and you're sitting there thinking, why am I paying all this money every month to back this stuff up? But when it does go down, oh, you'll know why. You'll know why you paid for it, to have it all backed up. And backing up your entire system is always a good thing, because if you back the entire system up, then you can just go out there, grab it, and once you get your thing fixed, you can load it up again. And with all the viruses and everything flying around out there, it's always a good idea to back everything up. So it seems like they're like, kicking you with a knife every month, but in the long run, it's a good thing. It's like insurance, it's like health insurance,
I'm a little confused.
Yes.
If you're paying the cloud and your information is there, also need to back up your computer.
Well, No, but I'm saying if you have a service that backs up your information, it's good to pay for that service because if it's on your computer and you don't back it up, what happens if your computer crashes?
But if you, I thought it automatically. Then.
It depends, okay, so now we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but that's a good question, and she brings up a good point. If I'm out there working on the cloud on a program, so let's say I'm out there and I want to go see all the last, 40 things that I purchased and the invoices I purchased at Amazon, those things are going to be out there on Amazon. So even if your computer crashes, he brings it back up, you log in out there to the Amazon website, you log into your account, and you can go out there and find your last 40 invoices. They're all lined up really nice. So that there's no reason for that. But if there's things that are on your PC, like say you have your email directory, or you've got your pictures and you're putting them on your PC. If something happened to your PC and you didn't have those someplace else, you may lose them if your PC crashes. It depends on what you do. Like if you take pictures off your phone and that's all you use, likely they're on the cloud somewhere. They're probably on your phone service provider. Okay, I don't take very many pictures. I take pictures of, text people. Go ahead.
Well, I think, for one thing, you have to put in the settings that you want it to go to the cloud. And like with Apple, if you have over a certain amount of information, then you pay for the subscription. I personally also have an external drive. I have an external drive that I have attached to my computer so that as an additional backup, plus I also have a large size USB drive as a backup, and I back up everything to all those places because if the internet went out, if there's some reason, or the electricity went out or something, then I have a way to access all that. So I do all of it on the internet and off of it.
But if I take pictures, let's go back to the picture thing. If I take pictures with my camera, that's not going anywhere. It's going into my little SIM card on the camera, right? And what happens if I want to save those or I want to view them? I load them on my PC so I can see my slideshow, right? Those aren't necessarily going to the cloud unless you've got some sort of a cloud storage service that you're paying $2.99 or 99 cents a month for. And you've said, when I load things into this file, I want this file to save up there. So you have to set those settings, but that's the difference. And that's how come you have to know or understand what are the things that are local. So I'm trying to get you to think, what are the things that you're locally computing? Because things that you compute locally are on your PC. And then what are things that you're computing in the cloud? If you're computing it in the cloud and doing it in the cloud, they're storing it and they've got it. So the company has it. And if you're doing it locally, you have control over it. So it's sitting on your PC. Do you want to make sure that you toss it out there to a cloud storage service? Then you can. And if you don't have that, then those things will remain just on your PC or the external hard drive. I have the same thing set up on my PC at home, an external hard drive. So I load a lot of things onto that so that I basically have the same information in both places, on my laptop and on my hard drive, in case my laptop dies, or I buy a new one. I want to load up a new laptop. All of that stuff that I had on the other one, you can either pay 80 or 100 or whatever it is dollars for some software that will help you sync the two things up, or you can have it all loaded on your external hard drive and then you just load it back up into your new PC. So there's a zillion different ways to skin that kitty. But yes.
Software. It's difficult sometimes when you want to delete photos. And you maybe only want to delete them from one of your devices. But if you delete it and everything is synced to the cloud, you may be deleting the photo everywhere.
Yeah, and again, that's a lot of times that settings too.
stream and cloud, which is different. And it's, like you said, it's all about settings. And not to muddy the waters, but I do want to say this thing as there's people who are snowbirds or people who move from one place to another. You had mentioned on Comcast accounts, you can get to your email. However, you may in the future want to set up a Gmail or Yahoo, something that's not tied to an internet provider like Comcast. Because say you move back to Minnesota and they don't have Comcast in your area, you're gonna have to set up a new, so.
Yeah, so that's really kind of the point now that we got our slide back here. Public cloud providers, that's a great example of if you do a email account at Yahoo or at google.com or whatever, you're setting it up across a very wide public network that really spans the world. So you can go anywhere and catch that stuff. If you set it up with like Comcast is still a public cloud, but it's a much smaller, because they're a much smaller, more regional type of cloud. So you may not be able to access it.
But if you, once you stop using that service, you can't get in there.
Right.
You can't your own.
Yeah, that's true. You can't see the old
Maybe
emails.
you want, but
Yeah,
So it's a good idea to have another provider. Internet.
yeah, and I've been bit by that bug with Comcast, a couple things. You know, luckily I don't really care. I mean, it's not that I don't love people who send me emails, but
No, but some people say. there's an extra- I wish I- But now I'm.
yeah, good point.
Microsoft, when my pictures are off here and I stopped uploading some files, probably things to be able to stop them, but anyway, when it told, I was trying to reduce my size to, avoid getting overheat. But that's why I started to delete some files off of the cloud, but it says you're also deleting those off of your computer now at the same time. So even though I had it on my computer in the cloud before, by deleting the picture from the cloud, it also deleted it from my computer. And it didn't seem that I had a choice on it, so.
Yeah, that might have to do with sync settings, right? How you sync up your cloud storage versus your PC. So if you have it syncing every day, you can go down and you can do something to move those photos or do something with those photos on the PC before it syncs up at midnight and does its back, or you can maybe have it just sync one way and not the other. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that different companies handle it. I don't use those services, so I'm not sure what the settings look like. You'd have to look at it, but
All of this you can do. So in fact, when I tried to save an Excel file, first thing I was to do is to save it in the cloud first. And then save it to my computer, it might also affect.
I got it.
and when you lose internet connection or your computer fails in the middle of an Excel file, you'll be happy it does that.
Yeah, that's OneDrive settings is what that is.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's your OneDrive and it's OneDrive settings. You can take things off of your OneDrive and move them to. You can take things off of OneDrive and move them someplace else on your hard drive. And then they're on your computer separate and they're not part of the OneDrive. So there's options. And like I say, we can show you how to do some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's important to understand, like, for you, because I have the same problem when I started using OneDrive. It's like, every time I go to save a file from an attachment on an email, or I go to save a file, I do save as, so it automatically go to, it's going to the document folder. But when I look at the path, it's on the OneDrive folder, which is completely different than the My PC document folder. So you really have to, it gets very confusing. I've been caught in those whirlies before, so I know how you feel about it. It's frustrating, and the problem is we're inundated with so much of it out there. It's hard to keep up with what do I use, what's worth it, where is everything, what do I have when I get a PC and I open it up out of the box and turn it on, what all is in here and how do I really get it set up. They try to make it easy, but they also, all of these companies are out to make money. So, Dell is in it with Microsoft, and Microsoft's in it with Google and all these other companies. And, everything you do is spanning out to all these different companies now. you know, and that's where things get confusing, so. I'm glad you guys have a tech club. I don't have one in my place, but, okay. The private cloud, these are resources are dedicated, proprietary to a single organization hosts and manages the system. So I'm thinking in my work world, a private cloud would have been like the company I worked for before I retired was called SCI Solutions. And we offered scheduling software, results reporting software, and another variety of clinical type of system software to our clients. We held the cloud, we built the cloud. We had a data center over in Santa Clara. So, I went into the data center one day, I was like, wow, this is cool. Only one small little rack of it was our cloud, The US Bank was in there and a bunch of other big players were in this big, huge data center, but it was really cool to see. And you could see why you need really good air conditioning to keep it cool. And you could see why you needed a lot of power source because everybody's got everything plugged in. And of course, you have to be really careful when you're walking around because literally, if you trip over a cord and unplug it, which we did have a vendor do one day, it brings the whole system down. And then all of your clients who are trying to log into your cloud can't get to it. So it's not pretty. But anyway, we housed over 200 healthcare providers. They all accessed the applications through the internet. We encouraged them, but we didn't require that they had VPN connections. So they could still go out and use it through the public internet and they were fine. There was enough encryption and everything across the public internet that if they were typing there, or exchanging patient information or patient health care information, it was okay. But we always encourage them to do a more of a VPN connection because that was just a little bit more secure. And we wanted that security for HIPAA reasons. It's all heard of HIPAA, like healthcare information provider stuff. Okay, so now I'm putting this up here. You're probably reading it and going, what? So what I try to do with the history, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail here. I want to try to relate some history of computing basically a little bit so that we can kind of understand how did we get to where we are today. I took some of this information off there and I read this slide and I thought this is ridiculous. So I'm going to leave it up there. You can all read it and whatever. And I'm going to tell a story about history. Okay, so basically during the 60s, even before that, much of computing was completed on large mainframes that had the punch cards. Anybody in this room ever had that? Okay, there you go. Look at you guys. Okay. All right. Users had to be close to the mainframe computer in order to complete the task. And I remember when I was, I was 7, my dad drug us off to where he worked. He was a flight test engineer at Boeing when we lived up in Seattle. He wanted to take us to work one day and show us kids where he worked and what he did. And I remember he opened up the computer room where the computer resided. And I walked in and I swear it was as big as this room right here. It's crazy. And it was just full of all these machines and everything. I was like, wow. That was my impression of it. And then I didn't, I was only 7, so honestly, I didn't care anything beyond how cool that looked. And, years later, when my brother was in high school, my dad was bringing home boxes of punch cards to him so he could tape his notes for the debate team on them. Okay, so that started to go on the wayside as they started to get microchips and be able to, compact things down and make things smaller and such. So really smart engineers were thinking about something called remote job entry. And that's described as the entry or extraction of data from your mainframe computer using remote stations not located in proximity to the mainframe. So in other words, they're thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, first of all, many of us could get in here and use this computer all at the same time and use its computing power, and we can all do it just sitting at our desks. Don't have to get up, walk down to the computer and then go in and feed cards to it or whatever you had to do. Okay, so by the early 70s, full-time sharing solutions became available. And I'll just give you an example of my first experience when I first made the leap from clinical laboratory medicine into the technology world, and that was with Sunquest Information Systems. And I moved down here to Tucson 32 years ago to start working for them. And they basically had a laboratory information system. And what their system did was it allowed laboratory professionals to take the information that they were getting from all the different tests that they were doing on blood and urine and stool and everything on all these patients. And put that information into a repository or a database so that they can easily search and find the information. And they could print reports on that information, or they could take that information and feed it through an API, talk to another computer, and feed it into the hospital information system, which held the patient record. Okay, so that was my first experience. They were on a mainframe. And what that meant was clients would come and say, oh, we want to buy your system. It's really cool. So we would sell it to them. And what we would do is we'd give them a tape, literally a tape. We'd send it out to them with this big long instruction book on how to install it and set it up in your network. So their data centers were usually some dingy old closet down in the corner of the basement of the hospital. That's where they kept all the computers that ran the hospital cloud or their network, basically. And all of the networks back then were all wired. So you were always seeing people all over the hospital up in the ceiling tiles and that, making sure that the wires were all connected so that everybody was connected to those computers down in the basement, right? That's very much how the Sunquest information lab system worked. And people used the system. They could still access it up on the 4th floor ICU. They could access those results for their patients, but they had to be at what they call the dumb terminals. So that it was dumb terminals that were connected to it. They were wired, literally wired all the way through the hospital to get down there to the machine. Okay. So every time we had to do an upgrade to the software, what did we have to do? It wasn't pretty. We'd send them a tape with another big instruction book. Here's how you upgrade. Load this tape. Here's how you do it. So they would have to literally maintain the software. They also maintained the database that all the information went into. So if there was a problem with their server or the mechanism which they stored their data, what happened? They could get to it. So people weren't getting patient results. Then what did they do? They had little couriers running from the lab. And I know this because I was one time, where you're running information or you're printing out off the lab system, all these results, and you're running them up to the ICU or you're running them to the NICU or whatever. So a tremendous amount of work and a lot of work for IT, but it was great for IT professionals because they had a lot to do. Not to say that they don't today, because I think they have even way more to do today than they did back then. But that was all fine and good, but it was still limiting, right? They still had to be tethered to a PC or a dumb terminal that was literally physically tethered. So back to history, the computer geeks in Silicon Valley, they're not going to settle for mainframe systems for long. They want more. Okay, so they start thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if they could make software programs that they develop and have the ability to travel from one environment to another, and whatever environment or agent they land on, they can that software will execute properly wherever it lands. That's really kind of it's a concept. Okay, so if you're like thinking your eyes are whirling around, mine are too. It's a concept. How do I sit here on my phone, and how is it possible that I type something in and all of a sudden I'm doing all kinds of stuff, 3,000 miles away in New Jersey at some data center? But that's really what they were trying to figure out. How could they do that? They all wanted, back in the day, programmers programmed, they also shared a lot of information with each other because they wanted to learn. It was a new science. It was all very new and exciting. They needed to share to grow their knowledge. But then you start creeping into the 90s and everybody starts getting greedy. I don't want to have my, I don't want my source code, this guy over here to get my source code or programming and do something with it. So they all started getting, a little more pocketed and secretive about what they were doing. Anyway, so in the 1990s, Telescript, which was it's basically I don't know if it's necessarily a programming language, but it's like a programming foundation, was modeled on the concept of small programs, which are known as these agents, that would interact with computing services known as places, all of which would run on a cluster of one or more servers that hosted, that was called the Telescript cloud. So that's kind of where the cloud concept comes in. This Telescript was really kind of the foundation of, how do we do this? How do we make it so that I can type something on my little program that sits on my phone or my laptop, and it's gonna swing over here in the cloud and do greater things. You know, where's the cloud? What is the cloud? Well, we showed you a picture of the cloud and kind of, there has to be that delineation. You know, where am I responsible? What am I responsible for? I'm responsible for making sure the power is turned on, that I have an internet connection, and then I have a browser that allows me to get out to the internet. That's the things I'm responsible for in a nutshell. What's the company responsible over here on the other end that I'm logging into? They're responsible for the software, they're responsible for the data, they're responsible for all of that infrastructure. So that's all part of their cloud. Does that kind of make sense? All right, then the one last thing, another thing that the Telscripts did is they kind of created this whole concept of tele-identifiers and tele-addresses. And so do you ever notice that when you go out to a certain website, well, okay, your financial websites, right, your banks, if you log out there on your PC, you log out there every day to take a look or do whatever, your banking, no problem. You put your identity in and your password. And a lot of places now have what we call dual authentication, because that's something that's newer now, probably in the last 10 years. We've got this dual authentication. Do we all know what that is? Do I need to explain that, or you guys good with that? Okay, no questions about that. So a lot of times it'll just let you in, right? But now let's say that I'm in a hotel and I want to pay a bill on my bill paid, you know, from my bank. So I log in from there. A lot of times the bank will be like, start choking and flashing all kinds of messages. And like, hey, this isn't you. Well, how do you know it's not me? I've got my password and my username. You know, of course it's me. But it's because the IP address that you're coming from is totally different than it usually is. That is another form of security for them. They can look at that. I mean, banks and financial institutions, so far they haven't screwed up too bad, so I feel really confident that using them online. It's obviously very imperative for them to deal with the security. But all of these companies that host these clouds, it's their job to deal with the secure part of it too. The identification and the security. And I don't mean security just making sure that only people who want to log in or can log into it can log in, but that you're keeping hackers out too. I mean, you know, we have upwards of like 3,000, 4,000 hacks on our cloud every day at SCI. And we're just constantly having to keep that, you know, that stuff down. Go ahead.
Lori, just go back to logging into a hotel in your banking. Just, you have to be careful how you get in. I'm sure you could talk about that, how that's not secure. If you're using your Wi-Fi, you're better off.
I wouldn't do it.
Okay, I didn't want that to go by thinking, oh, it's fine to check your bank account. It's fine. I usually go off the internet, off your Wi-Fi and just go straight to the internet. Because once you're in somebody else's Wi-Fi, like a hotel or something, or a coffee shop, you don't want to be doing any damage.
Yeah, and that comes up to another point that I want to make somewhere in here. So that's basically the history. Don't worry if you're looking like that. I was like that too. Okay, so that's another good point though, is the disclaimers. Who reads the disclaimers before this? I'm agree, no. You know, my kudos to the people who do, but let me tell you, if every time you logged into a cloud site, you sat and read through the 20 pages of agreement that they have, you know, their privacy policy, you'd spend all your day reading that stuff and probably have to confer with your lawyer to understand it, right? But, you know, a lot of times they put a lot of that information in there. And even when you log into a hotel internet, if you notice, they make you, before they connect you to the internet, you have to go out. It'll take you automatically out to their website and make you read the agreement, make you read it. It'll flash it up to you and say, you know, agree to it. So they'll ask you to agree to it. And it's usually in that agreement, if you read through it, that it'll tell you that you're not really, you know, that they have certain information, or they're not a secure network and they're this and they're that. And they'll tell you all that information. So yeah, I mean, I could stand up here for 20 hours and talk about all this stuff, right? As I'm sure you guys can too. Okay, so let's consider the following. Let's bring this back into real life again. You have a healthcare network. You create an account for yourself. That is using an application program designed to create a space for your personal information about you at your healthcare provider network, but it also provides many other services, right? Within your space, you can schedule an appointment. When you're scheduling an appointment, likely you're scheduling an appointment on the front end, but in the cloud, once it hits their cloud, it's going out there and they have probably a system that does scheduling. And it's accessing that scheduling system. You don't have to know how to use their scheduling system. You don't have to have a login to their scheduling system. All you have to do is log into your personal account and it's going to take you out there. That's a great example of all of that infrastructure is in their cloud. And they are passing information back and forth through APIs and serving it up to you through your little portal. Okay, you can also view lab results. Again, you may have a different system that holds the lab results. Likely, that system's going to be completely different than a scheduling system. Hospitals have tons of systems. They have lab systems, scheduling systems, financial systems, blah, blah. They have tons of different systems. And being an IT person at a hospital, were you at a hospital or? Being an IT person at a hospital can get very dicey because there are so many different systems out there that you're dealing with. And then you can even find a specialist, which means you're accessing a software directory, which is a completely separate piece of software that they upkeep and do at their financial institution. And you can also pay bills, right? You can do that right on your little portal. So your portal is your portal into the services that are provided at this single login behind the scenes. And that all of those things that are specifically designed to do different things within that healthcare organization, that's their little cloud. That make sense? Any questions? I don't know, is there questions on that? Can you tell if people are on the phone or if there's any questions or? No, okay. Guess I can shout out. Okay, here's some benefits of cloud computing. We've already talked about some of them. Cost reductions. For big companies, it's a cost reduction because they don't have to hire IT people as many. You always have to have your IT guys, but you don't have to hire as many people to manage all these different systems if they're, letting the cloud services. We had the last company I worked with, SCI Solutions, was software as a service, and it's a SaaS company, and we offered the cloud service of doing scheduling for your healthcare organization. We had the cloud. I told you we built the cloud, we managed the cloud, we supported the cloud, and all of our clients would just simply log in through the internet and get to it. Okay, so device and location independence. Again, it allows you to use those different software, that different software at different places through wherever you want to be. You don't have to be tethered to it. Okay, as long as you have an internet connection and a PC or a really smart phone. Maintenance, it's easier because the data is hosted on an outside server, not your PC. So again, you don't have to back it up, which brings to your point that you made earlier, I thought everything's backing up on the cloud. Well, if all you use is cloud services when you're doing stuff on your computer, then you're right, everything's going to be backed up on all those different services. So you have to go out to all those different services to find stuff. But, to speak to that, they do keep that stuff up for you, so you don't have to. Then you don't get this message on your PC showing your system starts running really slow and you don't have any space left. I have to go buy more space. You don't have to do that. Okay, productivity and performance. You don't have to install the software. You don't have to maintain the software. You don't have to really even understand maybe a lot about it, depending on how they build the GUI or the graphical user interface, which is the part that you're looking at as the user, to go into their world and they're on their cloud to use those systems. Now, so there's so many different pieces and layers to this. And then availability. And it improves with the use of multiple redundant sites, meaning if you've got companies out there, like the reason Google and like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and all those things are so great is because they have multiple sites or multiple clouds and data centers all over the place. And they have redundancy, which means that, if I'm writing something to a data center here, it's gonna, fan all out there and sync up with all these other data centers. So if this data center goes down, these three over here don't work. And that's to keep everybody up and running off of. So for example, real life example back to working at SEI Solutions, our data center was in Santa Clara. Well, Santa Clara sits right on top of what? A fault line, okay? But it's really important for them, and they do all kinds of things. They build actually pretty good buildings over there now, but still, you're sitting on top of an earthquake fault line. What happens if something happens to that data center? Or maybe even just in your own little cage within that huge data center, somebody trips on a cord and unplugs a very important server, and now your system's down. How are you going to keep your clients being able to schedule appointments? And this, I can't tell you enough, being the VP of client support, how this affected our clients when that wouldn't happen. Something like that would happen, they would be dead in the water, trying to schedule appointments, trying to figure out what to do. How do we do this? Because if you're scheduling appointments, you got 20 people on the phone scheduling appointments, you all want to be accessing the same schedule, right? If I've got 20 different people and they're all doing their own thing, which often happened, it was the aftermath. If they were doing it manually, you'd have 3 people volleying for the same spot on a schedule because not everybody was looking at the same schedule. And then you had 3 people show up at the same appointment. So it was very difficult. So what we did was we created, or we purchased a service up in Phoenix that we could, that was a redundant like storage service, or actually it was a completely redundant cloud. So everything that we had built, the infrastructure and everything that we had in our cloud over in Santa Clara also existed as a backup in Phoenix. So when something happened to our data center over in California, which I was never going to, right? So we're in the data center that houses US Bank. This never going to go down. Okay, when that happened over there, we were able to, it took an hour or two, we were able to switch all of our customers and reroute them through the data center in Phoenix, which was very cool. That helped a lot, helped the support department anyway. So that kind of thing is what I'm talking about on that last point there. Okay, so what are some security and privacy concerns? Privacy concerns, the data the concerns that the service providers, so those guys who own the cloud that you're paying for or that you're using, it could be a free service or a paid service that you're using, can access data in the cloud at any time. So data can accidentally or deliberately be altered at any time. I know that my support people were always logging into our data center, our databases, and that for our different clients. They were kind of parsed out, but they still all shared a same database for the order system. And we had we had to like manually put in all kinds of stop gaps so that they wouldn't accidentally change a piece of our client's information. Because we had to be in there looking at the stuff that our clients had done, what they had input to try to help them solve a problem. And so we had to really be careful not to accidentally alter their information. We had access to all of it. It was all there in our file, right? So that's one thing to think about. Many cloud providers share information with third parties if necessary for purposes of law and order without warrant. Well, you guys probably don't have to worry about that, right? Maybe you did it in younger days, but not now. But, you know, some people, they get their nose bent out of joint about that. I kind of get it. You know, there's all kinds of debates. There's always news about, you know, people, oh, they're trying to get, you know, so-and-so's trying to subpoena this or not even subpoena, but, you know, trying to go out and get information. The information is provided, whether or not they do this, is provided on their privacy policy. And then we already talked about the privacy policy, who reads it, right? But there's another thing, another point about that can be under question.
So just curious, maybe email or delete something. From what I understand, it's still always there.
It usually is because a lot of these cloud companies they back up the data. And they do that to protect you and to protect your data. But if they back up the data, they might have it sitting on a different server. The server you're syncing to, you might have deleted the information, but if the information had already been archived or written off to another file drawer server, and it's sitting over there, then you're not touching it. Exactly. That's exactly true. So you,
Would someone be able to access, will I be able to access something that I'm from the outside company?
You might be able to call their support company. That's a good question. I know that for our company, if we had archived information that was off on other servers, because we couldn't hold, you know, we were in business for over 20 years from the time that the company started. We couldn't hold all that data on one server, so we archived things off, you know, to save it as backup and to save it, because in medical terms, you have to save information for 7 to 10 years in case anybody needs to access it again. And our clients would often call us, not often, but sometimes would call us and say, hey, I can't get back this far. I can't get reporting back that goes back 7 years. I can only go back 4 years. I need this information for maybe a court case or something that's come up. They've been subpoenaed to provide certain information. So we would have to access that data on our backup servers and provide that to our client. So yeah, you know, again, it could be in their privacy policy, whether or not they allow you to do that, or what they do with their backed up data. I'm guilty. I don't read the whole privacy policy all the time either. Okay, so security. The top 3 threats in the cloud are insecure interfaces with APIs, data loss and leakage, and hardware failure. Okay, so these are just some things that not you necessarily have to take care of that, because these are the components that are part of the cloud, but these are the things that the cloud providers need to be thinking about. They need to think about this stuff every day. They're thinking about it every day. They're always trying to keep up with anything that could happen on their cloud that could screw up their security. Yes.
Would that include hacking?
Yes. Yep. We had, are we getting to an ending point, or are we good? Are we?
You got a few more.
Okay, all right. So I'll try to speed this up a little bit, but I had a story, but I'll wait. If you guys want to hear it, you can hear it afterwards. So together these form technology vulnerabilities, and because data from hundreds of thousands of companies can be stored on one cloud, they are prime targets for hackers, because if hackers get into just one of those, look at all the information, right? What could happen to the I always forget the name of it, Tim, that one. Thank you, Equifax. Or Equa, no, what was it?
Equifax?
No, the Equifax is the one to do the Experian, thank you. Experian, thank you. I always forget that. You know, look what happened there. And that's a company where I didn't even ask for my information to be backed up. I mean, it's just being done so, you know, through government regulations and such. Data ownership. Who has legal ownership of the data? That's, you know, in our company, that became a problem when our clients would say, okay, we're done with SCI Solutions, we're going to go use Epic. You know, because our big competitor, we're going to do our scheduling off the Epic system. We want our data. You know, trying to figure out, we had to, a lot of times up front, before they would purchase our software, they would specifically ask, what's that, you know, who has responsibility for the data? And if you give me all my data, are you taking it off your archives? Because I don't want you to have it anymore, because I don't want somebody hacking into your system 10 years after I go away, hack into your archived server and get your information. So you have to think about those. And then end users, they don't have to understand the issue involved with signing on a cloud service. It's important to read the service agreement. That's the only thing I need to say there. Okay, security can improve in a cloud environment due to the centralization of the data and increased security-focused resources on the cloud provider. Like I said, it's in these guys' best interest to keep their cloud secure. So they're working hard to do that. Security is often as good or better than other traditional systems, probably because service providers are able to devote resources to security. A lot of times they hire, I mean, there are people who get degrees now or they get specialties. They'll get their IT degree or their computer science degree, and they'll actually specialize in that kind of stuff, in the security stuff. So those are the kind of guys you want on your team, right? And they come at a price. And then security, let's see, are you prepared? So using applications via the cloud offers 2 layers of complexity. There's both 2 sides to every coin, right? There's your side. What device am I logging into? Whether it be my phone, my PC, my tablet, whatever. What am I doing and what am I responsible for? And then what is the cloud service provider or the other side responsible for? So the cloud providers are doing their best to protect all our information, to make sure that when you pay for your new ladies and beautiful top at Coldwater Creek, that your payment information is being secure and that it's secured on their servers as well. So that somebody hacks in, they don't get it. And then you have a responsibility to stay secure on your end as well, okay? So keep your antivirus software up to date. Because when you're out trolling around on the web, great place to pick up malware or problems, virus software. So keep your antivirus software up to date. How many people have antivirus software? You all raise your hand. Okay, how many hate it? Yeah, really. Okay, and then keep your browser and your operating systems up to date as well. There's quite a good layer of security in your browsers. And if you don't keep those up to date, you could be cheating yourself out of the ability to ward off, new worms or new viruses that are being created out there. Because these guys, they're working as hard as the guys out here who are building all the worms and the viruses and trying to hack into this and that. You've got people on the other side of the table working just as hard. Sometimes I think they're at the same table. They're working just as hard to figure out how to crack that or to prevent that from downloading or to fix it once it's downloaded. And all of that is contained in your antivirus software, your browsers, your operating systems. That's why those things, a lot of that, there's a security level in all of those things. It's important to keep that up to date. And then lastly, but not leastly, and I'm sure I'm the lady of the news here, Liz, I'm sure that Liz would agree. Always log completely off of a program before you walk away. It's a good idea to always log off. So if you log on and Gloria, I'm so glad you're here. Have a fun time shopping and you do everything, you walk away. There's going to be a period of time. Most cloud providers will automatically log you off after a certain point, and most banks and everybody do that, all financial institutions, but it's not instantaneous. So, and it's not without its little message. So you always want to make sure that before you walk away from anything like that, you always log off. Very important. Okay, so I'm done. I'm back. Does anybody have any other questions? All right, well, thank you. for
I have a
allowing me.
couple comments. Number one, thank you. Your
Yeah.
true print will come out and help you when needed, and she did an excellent job, and thank you, Lori. The biggest takeaway I've got, real quick on Helen's question, everybody in Sunflower probably needs to spend $12 a year, but they probably don't need money. The story that I hate to share is I had somebody in Sunflower call me. They didn't understand syncing and settings. They had their Google account set to sync at midnight. They were out of storage, and rather than spend $12 a year, they started deleting things thinking it was still on the cloud, and it was until midnight that night when it synced. It erased everything she had saved for 10 years. And there, even though it's out there somewhere, there was no way to really. So come to the help sessions, make sure your settings are correct, especially on syncing. And $12 a year, I think most of us can.
Provide a $25 external drive.
Right.
Or a memory stick, we're up to 16 gig for $10.
Yeah, it's getting cheaper as time rolls on.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being a part of my birthday celebration. That was a big surprise. I appreciate Tim and Kay and Liz. So we have 3 more help sessions, 1 more in March, the 2nd and the 4th Sunday. And then in April, we'll have the 2nd and 4th Sunday. And then we won't plan on having them until the fall. Because we kind of have a hiatus, but we will have those classes and we will announce them. So that's another way to come and learn something. And again, if you'd like to teach a class, or if there's a particular topic that you want more information about, let us know. We'll see if we can find something.
everything.
Sometimes, yeah, if
Everything.
you don't know what you don't know. It's hard.
Never ending that.
Well, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Happy birthday.
Yes.
Yeah.